the world awoke to a startling new reality as the long-standing tensions between Israel and Iran erupted into a full-scale military conflict late last night, sending shockwaves across the globe. For years, political analysts and military experts had warned that the fragile peace in the Middle East was hanging by a thread. That thread has now snapped. Explosions lit up the skies over Tel Aviv and Tehran almost simultaneously, marking the beginning of a conflict that many fear could spiral far beyond the region. The confrontation began with a surprise barrage of missile strikes allegedly launched by Iranian-backed proxies across Lebanon and Syria, targeting strategic Israeli defense locations. Within minutes, Israel's Iron Dome air defense system sprang into action, intercepting multiple projectiles while several others hit civilian and military areas. Sirens wailed through Israeli cities as residents scrambled to bomb shelters, many reliving memories of past escalations with Hamas and Hezbollah. This time, however, the scale and coordination of the assault appeared far more extensive. Israel responded swiftly and forcefully. The Israeli Air Force launched immediate retaliatory airstrikes, not only hitting back at Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon, but also striking deep into Iranian territory for the first time in nearly a decade. Satellite imagery and local reports confirmed explosions near Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) bases and suspected nuclear enrichment facilities in Isfahan and Natanz. Fire and smoke were seen billowing into the night sky. Though Iranian officials downplayed the severity of the strikes, the damage was evident from civilian reports and amateur footage circulating online. What began as tactical strikes quickly evolved into a broader exchange. Iranian state media announced what they termed as a decisive response to Zionist aggression, confirming the launch of ballistic missiles targeting Israeli air bases and infrastructure. Israeli Defense Forces IDF officials admitted that several bases sustained damage but emphasized their readiness for a prolonged conflict. Meanwhile, both nations have activated reserve units, canceled all commercial flights, and warned citizens to brace for further escalation. The United Nations convened an emergency session early this morning, with Secretary General Antonio Guterres pleading for immediate de-escalation and restraint. However, initial diplomatic efforts appear to be faltering as both sides double down on military rhetoric. In a televised address, Israeli Prime Minister reaffirmed the nation's right to defend itself and warned Iran of consequences beyond imagination should the attacks continue. Iranian president responded with equal defiance, accusing Israel of initiating the conflict and vowing to liberate Palestine from oppression. The ramifications of this war are already being felt globally. Crude oil prices surged by nearly 10% within hours, reflecting concerns over disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, through which nearly a third of the world's oil supply passes. Global stock markets saw significant downturns as investors reacted to the news. Major airlines rerouted flights away from Middle Eastern airspace, and governments across Europe, Asia, and the Americas issued urgent travel advisories for citizens in the region. On the humanitarian front, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. Casualty figures remain unconfirmed, but early estimates suggest dozens have been killed and hundreds wounded on both sides. Hospitals in northern Israel and western Iran are overwhelmed, with emergency services struggling to cope. Images emerging from the conflict zones show residential neighborhoods reduced to rubble, children crying amid ruins, and families being evacuated under the cover of darkness. Aid organizations are calling for immediate corridors to deliver medical and food supplies, but ongoing shelling is hampering access. Social media has become a digital battlefield of its own, with a flood of images, videos, and unverified claims from both sides. Hashtags like Iran-Israel war and WW3 are trending globally, while misinformation and propaganda circulate at alarming rates. Governments and tech platforms are working to control narratives, but the flood of real-time content makes it nearly impossible to distinguish fact from fiction in the heat of war. What makes this conflict even more alarming is the risk of a wider regional explosion. Hezbollah has already confirmed its involvement, and fears are growing that other militant groups in Iraq and Yemen may enter the fray. In Gaza, Hamas has fired rockets towards southern Israel, potentially opening yet another front. Meanwhile, Arab nations are being pulled into the geopolitical vortex. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have called for restraint, but behind closed doors, alliances and rivalries are being recalibrated. World powers are scrambling to prevent further escalation. The United States has condemned Iran's actions, but also urged Israel to show strategic patience. Russia, traditionally aligned with Iran, has called for peace while quietly reinforcing its presence in Syria. China, heavily reliant on Middle Eastern oil, has called the situation extremely dangerous and urged all sides to return to dialogue. The situation presents a complex web of interests, alliances, and red lines that, if crossed, could plunge the entire region, and possibly the world, into chaos. Amid the chaos, stories of human resilience and solidarity are beginning to emerge. In both Israel and Iran, ordinary citizens are reaching out online, sharing messages of peace, and refusing to let politics define them. Doctors and volunteers are working round the clock, often risking their lives to help the wounded. In bomb shelters and makeshift camps, strangers are becoming family. These glimpses of humanity remind us that behind every airstrike and explosion are lives forever altered. As dawn breaks over the Middle East, the world watches with bated breath. Diplomacy is racing against time. The fear of a regional or even global conflict looms large. But even in this darkest hour, there remains a sliver of hope that reason will prevail over rage and that leaders on all sides will choose dialogue over destruction. Until then, the world remains on high alert, and history turns another page under the shadow of war.